Verma, can men get pregnant?
Dr. Verma,
Yes.
I just want to make sure we're
Dr.
all
Verma,
addressing
can
each
men
other
get
with-
pregnant? As a doctor, give me your opinion. As a doctor, can men get pregnant? Doctor, can men get pregnant?
No.
I know you're a lawyer, an AG, like I was an AG. Can men get pregnant?
No.
Is it easy for men to get abortion drugs across state lines?
Extraordinarily.
In fact, I had staff members who said, my name is Michael, how do I get abortion drugs? Would it surprise you to know that there are all kinds of organizations ready to satisfy that whim of a man to get abortion drugs?
Sadly, it does not surprise me.
Senator Ashley Moody came into this hearing with a warning about coercive abortions and then put Dr. Nisha Verma on the spot with a blunt question. Can men get pregnant? What followed was a tense exchange over abortion drugs, interstate access, and allegations of people secretly giving them to others.
It's very hard for me also to sit here as someone who has been in the legal worlds and seen the horrific stories that have come to light about coercive abortions, that is gaslighting. I would ask my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to refrain from using that language because there have been very serious incidents where women and their children were harmed. And that is not gaslighting, that is fact. And I'm also disheartened that we heard, as we bring up the instance of men or even some women crushing up these abortion drugs and giving them to people surreptitiously in order to end a life, that we should tolerate this new trend in crime, in murder, because as one of my Democratic colleagues just put it after referring to these instances as gaslighting, because, and I'm quoting my Democratic colleague, coercion of abortions is long-standing part of human history. That is unacceptable. And in fact, when I was Attorney General in Florida, just a year or so ago, a woman in Florida got an abortion drug from out of state as part of a plot to kill her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend's child in the womb. I mean, this stuff isn't made up. When I was a judge in Florida, back before I was the Attorney General, in my hometown, a guy got an abortion drug, put a different label on the bottle, labeled it as an antibiotic, and gave it to his former girlfriend and said, you need to take this. And she did. And she had to testify at trial with a picture of a sonogram of that child.
Since this hearing, the legal fight over access to Mifepristone has intensified. In May 2026, the Supreme Court allowed the existing rules permitting Mifepristone to remain available by mail and through pharmacies while litigation continues. That means the interstate access issue Moody raised here is still very much alive months after this hearing.
This is not gaslighting, this is happening. And as states are trying after Dobbs to come up with, as a people, what their laws are going to be, we here in Washington have to make sure that those laws that they come up with to prevent this kind of thing, to protect their people, are not circumvented. Ms. Verma, can men get pregnant?
Dr. Verma,
Yes.
I just want to make sure we're all
Dr.
addressing
Verma, can
each
men
other
get
with-
pregnant? As a doctor, give me your opinion. As a doctor, can men get pregnant?
I mean,
I'll move on to the next one. Is doctor, can men get pregnant?
No.
I know you're a lawyer, an AG, like I was an AG. Can men get pregnant?
No.
Is there any reason why men should get their hands on the abortion drug?
None.
And are they getting their hands on an abortion drugs?
They are.
And are they getting them through the mail across state lines?
They are.
Even when it is illegal and the people have decided within states that they want to prevent that.
In May, the Fifth Circuit moved to restrict nationwide access to mailed Mifepristone, but the Supreme Court stepped in and kept the existing access rules in place while the case proceeds. So the exact question Moody raised here, whether state restrictions can be circumvented through interstate access, became part of a major federal court fight.
They are, and I would just add that that is because there is a concerted effort to prevent any accountability and any human contact. So they go to anybody who asks for them. They do not identify now, in many states, the prescriber, the pharmacy, or the recipient. And so this is very dangerous. It is by design created that way in order to circumvent Dobbs.
Is it easy for men to get abortion drugs across state lines?
Extraordinarily.
In fact, I had staff members who said, "My name is Michael, how do I get abortion drugs?" Would it surprise you to know that there are all kinds of organizations ready to satisfy that whim of a man to get abortion drugs?
Sadly, it does not surprise me.
And not just in your, I know from working with you as fellow attorneys general, I know that you value life and you want to protect life and you're doing everything you can to do that. But in your role as a prosecutor that is protecting people and is meant to, and it is your job to enforce the people's laws to protect people, are men getting these drugs and using them to surreptitiously end life in their girlfriends, wives, lovers, etc.?
They are men and in some times parents and women. And in two of the cases that we are in fact prosecuting, shield laws are blocking our ability to do that. And I cannot understand why any governor would refuse our extradition papers so that we can prosecute someone who coerced their child to have an abortion.
The FDA continues to recognize Mifepristone as an approved medication for ending an intrauterine pregnancy through 70 days of gestation, with the drug remaining subject to specific federal safety requirements. Certified prescribers and pharmacies can dispense it, including through the mail. That matters because the central issue raised during this January 14th hearing was not simply whether abortion medication is legal, but whether the system can prevent someone from obtaining or misusing medication to coerce or harm another person. There have also been important developments since the hearing. On January 20th, 2026, Senator Ashley Moody introduced the Child Interstate Abortion Notification Act, seeking additional federal protections and parental notification requirements involving interstate abortion cases. In July 2026, abortion medication and the Comstock Act were again raised during Todd Blanche's confirmation hearing, showing that the federal government's authority over abortion-related drugs and interstate distribution remains a major unresolved issue. Meanwhile, litigation challenging federal abortion medication policies continues, meaning the legal framework surrounding Mifepristone and interstate access could still change. That context makes Moody's exchange with Dr. Nisha Verma more significant than the viral question about whether men can become pregnant. Moody was trying to focus attention on a specific law enforcement concern. What happens when someone obtains abortion medication for another person and secretly gives it to them without their knowledge or consent? If someone deliberately uses medication to terminate another person's pregnancy against that person's wishes, the issue goes far beyond the normal abortion debate. It can involve coercion, assault, deception, domestic violence, and potentially serious criminal charges. But the hearing also revealed an important disagreement over how government should respond. Moody's argument was that easier interstate access and remote dispensing can create opportunities for abuse, particularly when someone other than the intended patient obtains the medication. The opposing argument is that criminal acts should be prosecuted as criminal acts without creating broad restrictions that make legitimate medical care harder for patients who voluntarily seek abortion medication. That distinction is critical. A medication can be legally approved and still be abused. The existence of legitimate medical uses does not eliminate the possibility of criminal misuse. But individual cases of alleged abuse also cannot automatically establish that the entire medication abortion system is unsafe. Policymakers have to separate the two questions: how do you stop coercion, and how do you protect lawful medical access? The FDA's position is particularly relevant here. Mifepristone was originally approved in 2000, and the current federal framework allows its use through 10 weeks of pregnancy under specified conditions. The agency also maintains requirements involving certified prescribers and pharmacies. So the debate should not be framed as though the medication is completely unregulated. There's already a federal regulatory system. The disagreement is over whether that system provides enough protection against misuse and whether additional restrictions are justified. The interstate issue makes everything even more complicated. Since the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision returns substantial abortion policy authority to the states, states have adopted very different laws. Some restrict abortion heavily, while others protect access and have enacted shield laws limiting cooperation with certain out-of-state investigations. That creates a difficult legal question. If a medication is prescribed and dispensed legally in one state but used in another state with stricter abortion laws, which state's rules should control? What happens when prosecutors in one state request records or cooperation from a state that has adopted protections for abortion providers? And how far can Congress go in creating federal rules for medication that the FDA has already approved? Those questions are becoming increasingly important, and the developments since this hearing show that the issue is not going away. Moody's legislation and the continued federal debate over abortion medication demonstrate that Congress is now dealing with abortion not only as a healthcare issue, but also as a question involving interstate commerce, criminal enforcement, federal authority, and state sovereignty. The viral exchange about whether men can become pregnant ultimately distracted from a more consequential policy question. Moody was attempting to establish that someone who is not pregnant can obtain abortion medication and potentially misuse it. But the larger issue is whether lawmakers can design safeguards that specifically target coercion without treating every person who accesses the medication as a potential criminal. There is also a constitutional question. After Dobbs, states have significant authority over abortion policy, but federal criminal law, FDA regulation, interstate commerce, and state sovereignty can overlap. Congress therefore has to determine where federal authority should begin and where state authority should remain. The strongest argument for additional safeguards is straightforward. No person should be able to secretly administer medication to another person to terminate a pregnancy against their will. The strongest argument against broad restrictions is equally important. Safeguards aimed at preventing coercion should not unnecessarily interfere with patients who are legally obtaining and using an FDA-approved medication. What this hearing really showed is that the abortion medication debate is entering a much more complicated phase. The question is no longer simply whether abortion should be legal or illegal. It is also about who controls medical decisions, how states enforce radically different laws, how federal agencies regulate medication, and how law enforcement responds when legitimate medical systems are allegedly exploited for criminal purposes. The challenge for Congress is to protect people from genuine coercion while avoiding laws so broad that they interfere with legitimate medical care. And as more abortion-related disputes cross state lines, lawmakers may eventually have to answer a much bigger question. Should the federal government establish nationwide safeguards for the interstate use of abortion medication, or should states remain primarily responsible for deciding how these cases are regulated and prosecuted?